This video will tell you everything you need to know to be confident in the process of buying your first home here in Australia. I'm a licensed mortgage broker and I've helped a lot of Australians go through the process of buying their first home. Now, this scenario is going to be very much tailored for Victoria, but the overall structure will apply to other states as well. So, to get started, step number one is, believe it or not, to establish the goals as to why you want to buy property. Now, why does that matter? It matters because depending on your goals, we'll probably look to use different structures to support you with this purchase, which matter in step number two. So the reasons that you might want to buy property, and the ones that I often see, are to escape the rental market, to build wealth through property, through things like renovations, property price appreciation, or if it's an investment property, things like rental income, to provide more housing security. So if you're tired of getting told to find a new place to live. Or the other one I see is people just looking to buy their forever home straight out the gate, which is also great. That brings us to step number two, which is banks and structures. Not the greatest title, but the way that I go about explaining this is I call it the yin and the yang of lending. That's because my wife is a yoga teacher. So the yin of lending is the amount that you have to contribute towards a purchase. The yang is the amount that a bank is going to lend to you to support you with that purchase. We combine the two of those to find a structure that's first of all going to support you, and then of those banks that will support you with that structure, who's going to do it in the most cost-effective way possible at that point in time, right? So to cover the yin and the yang of lending briefly and a few of the government schemes that might support you with this. When we're looking at the yin of lending, we're primarily focusing on the amount of money that you have to contribute to this purchase. If you need funds to contribute, and the instance that you might not need funds to contribute are if you have parents who own property here in Australia. I'll make a specific video on that for a later date. The link for that will be here. So for this example, of the funds you have available for the purchase, if you're purchasing a property in Australia and you have less than a 20% deposit, you're often charged what's called lender's mortgage insurance. Why are you charged that? If a bank is lending you 90 or 95% of the value of a property, they associate more risk with that than just lending you only 80%. So to compensate for that risk, there's a fee involved in the purchase, and that is lender's mortgage insurance. So while we're looking at the amount of funds you have to contribute and the deposit size you have, the first thing that we'll look to assess is whether or not you qualify for the Australian government 5% deposit scheme. The link for checking that is going to be in the description, or you can just book a call with myself and we will check that for you. But with this, and specifically for Victoria, if you're purchasing a property and you qualify for the 5% deposit scheme up to a purchase price of $950,000, you can use a deposit as little as 5% and you will not pay any lender's mortgage insurance. So, is it a good idea to borrow 95% of the value of a property? Now, if you're both working full-time, if your salaries have just recently increased, or if you've previously prioritized paying off other debts, credit cards, car loans, student loans, and you're looking to get into the property market because that is what aligns with your long-term goals, then potentially using the 5% deposit scheme to purchase that property is a good option. We'll assess that at that point in time, give you all the information you need, and you can then make a decision from there. Now, if you have a 8% deposit, do you need to borrow 95% of the value of a property? No. You can contribute, if you've got a 5 or 10 or 15%, as much of that as you would ideally like. Now, it's going to depend on bank to bank how much you actually have to contribute. If you have the funds available with the majority of banks that support the 5% deposit scheme, you need to contribute the large majority of those funds, and then they will support you with the remaining loan amount beyond that. But effectively, within those funds that you have available, you also need to cover the purchasing costs that apply when buying property. Now, in Australia, there's a number of costs. The first and most infamous is stamp duty. Now, the other ones are other small government fees, costs for your solicitor to review contracts for buying a home, building and pest fees, and then also the application fees for the bank if they apply themselves. So making sure that you've got this balance between the deposit you're putting towards the purchase and then the amount of those funds that are covering the purchasing costs is important to find, and that's going to very much affect the purchase price that you're going to be able to buy at. Within those purchasing costs, there are government schemes that are there to potentially reduce those for you if you do qualify for them. The link to check if you qualify for the stamp duty concession or exemption is going to be in the description. I'll link that for Victoria specifically for this video. Or again, you can book a call with myself and we'll check that for you. Now, the stamp duty concession in Victoria, if you qualify, will remove the stamp duty costs up to a purchase price of $600,000, and then it will reduce the stamp duty costs up to $750,000. Anything beyond that, you will just pay the standard stamp duty amount. Now, a common question that I get, because there's a lot of construction going on around here at the moment in Victoria, is that if you purchased land, for example, $600,000, and then you had a construction for, or a build contract construction for $400,000, so the total end value is going to be $1 million, do you qualify for the stamp duty reduction? Because the land that you purchased was $600,000, if you qualify for that exemption, you will not pay any stamp duty on that, regardless of the end total value being more than the stamp duty concession amount, right? Once you've checked those and you've sort of found the balance as to what's going to be a good fit for you, accounting for things like a savings buffer that's left over, you don't want to go down to the dollar and have no savings remaining after a purchase. The next thing to look at will be the yang of lending, which is the amount that the bank's going to lend to you to support you with this next purchase. So within that, there's two main things that they look at, and that's the income that you have. So that's going to be things if you're self-employed, if you have bonus income, if you're on a standard salary, if you have overtime allowances, if you're casually employed, or if you've got a second job, or if you've got family tax benefits that you're receiving. All banks are going to look at that differently. Now, when you combine that with your current expenses or your outgoings, which are things like your standard day-to-day groceries, things like private health, your car bills, if you have car loans, student loans, credit cards, all those sorts of things, we'll find a balance between a bank that looks at your income in the way we need them to and your expenses in the way that we need them to find a bank that's going to offer you the amount that's going to support you with the purchase you want to make. And then of those banks that will support you, who's going to do it in the most cost-effective way possible at that point in time. Finding that balance between the yin and the yang to get that structure in place for you is effectively step number 2. Now, to sort of add to that, you can definitely go through, you can have the conversations with all different banks yourself, or you can book a call with us. The link is in the bio. There are no costs for any of these calls or the services we provide. There are no added costs to your loan. We're licensed with over 60 different banks and lenders, and we have an application approval rating of 100%. Again, the link is in the bio. We'd love to support you with this purchase. Moving on to step number 3. Once you've got that bank, that structure that's going to support you with this, the next step is going to be apply for pre-approval. What is pre-approval? When you submit an application to a bank, you're effectively telling your story to them, right? Which is a pitch as to why they should lend you the amount that you need for this purchase. You combine that story with your income documents, your expense documents, and the bank is going to review that story. They're going to review the documents for both income and expenses. And if all looks good, the bank will come back with a green tick and say you are pre-approved for a purchase price of X, or pre-approved for a loan amount of X. Or if the application was a bad one, you will be denied or just asked for more information. Ideally, that's not the case. So make sure you're working with someone who knows what they're doing. Now, the next step beyond that is how long is that pre-approval going to be in place for, and how long do you have to buy a property? The majority of pre-approvals last for 90 days. Now, if it takes you 91 days to find a property, it's not a big deal. It's just a case of renewing that pre-approval at the sort of 80-day mark to make sure that it is extended. That might just require updated income and expense documents, which is fine. So once you've got that pre-approval in place, the next step is going to be to go ahead and start putting offers forward on properties. Now, that is an entire video in and of itself. I'm going to make that one with a local real estate agent here in Victoria to talk you through what sorts of offers they find most attractive and that are going to give you the best chance of having your offer accepted by the person selling their home. That video is going to be here when it comes out. Best of luck with your house hunting. See you next time.